Hello and welcome to Restricted Access Live, where we'll be discussing the cases that we've covered this month. I'm your host, Chris, and with me today we've got Ethan.
Hey guys, how's it going?
We've got Mark.
Oh, hi.
Marri.
Hi, everyone.
Tenille.
Hello to yous.
Tobias.
Hello.
And Sam.
Hey guys.
So the first case we're going to be looking at tonight is the Nazca mummy case, which I know has caused a lot of a lot of strong feelings to come out in the team. So I'll let Marri start off with a few notes that have come up whilst we were sort of researching the story.
Okay, so to recap this a little bit, a journalist with absolutely no history in archaeology and a complete lack of any scientific background and a history of known frauds and constant hoaxes decided to announce to the world and get funding from a site that is quite known for less than scientifically accurate documentaries about aliens to fund his expedition to grave rob from the Nazca plains in Peru, and has broken several laws and is in hot water with quite a bit of the Peruvian government officials because he is illegally trafficking human remains, and there's no doubt those are human remains. The DNA testing may not be back, but there is no doubt those are human. Absolutely everything is human. It's not even that he totally botched the archaeological dig. There was no archaeological dig. There was no archaeologist on site. They improperly handled the mummy. They totally just botched the whole thing. If it was, and it's not, but if it was a real alien mummy that they were finding, then they had lost absolutely every shred of scientific evidence credibility because they didn't do it correctly. On top of
I mean, yeah, we were discussing when we were looking over the footage. We were discussing amongst us the way it was being treated in the little trailer that we were seeing. We've got that cardboard box it's being dumped out of, and then we almost made a joke about how much they were prodding and poking and ripping bits out. It looked crazy.
And it's so disrespectful. It's so disrespectful. Humans shouldn't be treated like that. I'm an archaeologist. I understand the studying human bodies in order to learn, because that's the only way we can learn about them. But when I was still in training in college, before they handed us any sort of actual human remains, the first thing they told us, first and foremost, you remember that these were once humans. These were living, breathing people. These were somebody's sons, daughters, grandchildren, possibly wives, husbands, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. They were once alive, and you have to remember that. And the way they treated her, this is a her, the way they treated her is just disgusting.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it's hard not to be disgusted by what, to all appearances, is yet another Jamie Masson money grab. I mean, this is more than reminiscent of the supposed Roswell mummy of only a few years ago, that he had heralded at the time, of course, as being the next big discovery in ufology, and once again, it's sort of his trademark scam, for lack of a better word, of coming up with these scientifically dubious cases involving real mummies. I'm not sure why that seems to be a trend, but it is, and charging pay-per-view for what are purportedly scientific discoveries. Now, I'm certainly no scientist. I'm a trained writer, but I think I know enough about science to know that if you're paying for it, it's probably not good science.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we all brought up as well, isn't it? It's if this had any ounce of credibility, you'd have people flying in from all over the place to get a look at what was actually going on here.
There are a lot of times where you do have to pay to get access to real scientific stuff, such as like the real credible scientific journals are used. Some libraries will pay thousands of dollars for a subscription to them, but that's for the library to get access to them. People can go into the library and access it for free, any of the peer-reviewed documents. And there's such media sensationalism about it that it's being blown out of proportion, and they have to be cherry picking what these so-called experts are saying, if they are experts at all, which I'm not so sure. The way that they're like, oh my God, there's no suture lines, it's completely fused, as if she'd never seen anything like it before. But that happens. It's rare, but it does happen.
And the most telling thing was the fact that he turned up to the dig site with a team of journalists, but not with any actual archaeologists that anyone could pinpoint. I mean, that alone was a red flag.
Because you knew no archaeologist would do it, because that you have to have a permit, you have to have native archaeologists on site, you can't take anything out of the country. To him doing this, him going to Nazca and taking these mummies out, he's breaking the law. You have to have a permit, and it is a very rigorous process to get permission to go in and excavate anything, let alone to remove the bodies from the country. He has broken the law.
So we're saying this is like the equivalent of, say, a graveyard in England, someone exhuming a body and then prodding it around, and from I don't know, a medieval body, a mummy or whatever, and prodding it around on camera. Are we saying it's sort of that kind of thing that's happening here?
It's like if I went to England, found a medieval burial site, put it on my porch back here in America, took photographs of it and put it up online. That is what we're dealing with right here. That's the level of science we're dealing with. Not even if I were to do it, because I am an archaeologist. So, like, if my sister, who's no scientific background, if she were to do it and put it up on some digital freak show online for money.
I mean, if I could play devil's advocate for a moment, and this really would be playing devil's advocate, the only thing that sort of gave me hope for the credibility of this story is the way that we didn't have access to the full footage. I mean, he wanted everyone to pay for full access to the footage, but giving him just even the slightest shred of hope that this might be credible was the fact that I sort of hope that in the other bits of footage that you aren't allowed to see, they had other experts come in, they had things that explained it, and really that was the main reason that I was willing to sort of look into the story further, was that maybe there was stuff that wasn't explained, but from everything we saw, I don't think so.
I know that a few people had actually mentioned that they were kind of upset with us because we didn't pay for access to that footage, so they don't feel like we gave it our due diligence. But at the same time, we, at least as a channel, we don't want to support someone who we, for all intents and purposes, believe is grave robbing. There would be an appropriate way, at least as far as I'm concerned, that you could do that. If you needed money to fund such an excavation, it would be a lot more credible if he were to do something like set up a GoFundMe account and then release things as they came out. But that's just what I think.
No, I completely respect their opinion on that one. I think that's fair enough. And I also think that you made a very good point there. Get the money first and then go excavate.
I think it's worth pointing out as well that Marri and Sam are key sort of analysts here, and it's not like we had to buy the footage to probe further because we didn't know or anything. Marri, has got a lot of experience in this field, and could immediately assess kind of the state of this footage and what it meant. So we didn't need to sort of dig any deeper, because at this point we had enough craziness from what we'd seen in the trailer to go with.
Exactly, we've seen enough. It just wasn't worth it.
I will admit to having pirated those videos because I was not willing to pay money to a black market body trade. That is all this was. They're grave robbers, body snatchers. It's stealing. So I stole from the thieves, and I did watch the rest of the videos. No, there really is nothing worth paying for in there, because it's just more bull.
All right, guys, we know that these aren't scientists. That's all good. We know that. But what do you actually think about the body itself? What do you think it is? What do you think it was? I know there were some, new articles about it. I wasn't following the story, to be honest. So what happened after that?
It is very clearly a native Peruvian mummy from the area that has been tampered with. They've removed multiple fingers and they sliced into the palm of the hand to reveal the metatarsals to make it look like they have elongated fingers and tiny little palms. What you're seeing are the bones of the inside of the hand. They look very much like finger bones, but that's what gives the palm of your hand structure, that and musculature. The elongated skull is very typical of the area. The way it's elongated is called cradle boarding or skull wrapping, and it's actually more unusual not to see it in the mummies and skeletons of the area. It's very, very common, and it is a lifelong practice of skull reshaping. That is very typically human and very typical of mummies of that area. I don't know whether or not that residue was placed on it before or after, but I do believe this is an actual mummy. It's in a very typical position of mummies from that area. So I would be surprised if this wasn't a real mummy that they mutilated and put the spicy residue stuff on top of.
I also, I think that because we're mainly talking about the primary Nazca mummy, but they came out with that second one that was smaller. It was obviously a juvenile, but it did not have a skull with it. I believe that this is just a theory, and I don't have anything to go off of, but I believe that they likely just removed the head because it didn't conform to something that was more alien that they could spin in that direction. So they just removed it. May have already fallen off, but they just did not include it with what they were researching.
I'm actually surprised that it is a real human body. When I first saw it, my sort of knee-jerk reaction was that it was just a mold, and not even a particularly good mold. So, and I kind of going off of that thought that the rest of the footage had just been faked. But yeah, that's interesting.
Oh no, I'm absolutely sure that's a real mummy. Everything I see about it looks very typically like a mummy of that area. The soft tissue they showed up in the inside is very typical of what happens to a body when it's been mummified. The ears and nose being missing is very typical of mummification, because if they don't get it mummified right away, the ears and the nose are some of the first things to rot or be scavenged by scavengers.
So our the next case that we did was the mysterious satellite explosion, which we saw some pretty amazing footage with the kind of tracking footage of the satellites. So has anyone got any particular theories on this one they want to throw in?
It probably got hit by space debris and exploded.
So yeah, it was an AMC-9. It was the footage that we've seen. We see as some other satellites pass it, starts to flash, and exploded.
Yeah, just one thing. How were we so sure that the things that were passing the satellite were another satellites that were on a lower orbit in, I don't know how you call that.
They can.
There have been some Redditors that have checked it compared to where other satellites would have been at the time. There are some amazing Redditors out there that are able to check all this. I don't know how they checked it, but I'm going to believe them because it sure does look like exactly the same as it did as the other satellite that's exploding does, just faster because it's at a different level, orbit level. So, but they said that they checked it compared to where other satellites would have been at that time.
Oh,
I think
okay.
there are apps. I've got a few stargazy friends who I think you can basically check when certain satellites and whatnot are going over and compare them to sort of patches of the sky.
Yeah, we don't have a whole lot to say on that. It's a satellite that probably had either an internal malfunction or got smacked by some debris and went kablooey.
Or alien.
Or alien.
That could have been alien.
That's the thing. It does seem like such a straightforward case that the satellite was traveling and coincidentally there are other satellites passing it or traveling near it at the time, and it struck a piece of debris up in the atmosphere or in its orbit, sorry, and it just broke apart, right? It wasn't really that strange of a case.
No, it was pretty straightforward, but everybody was talking about it, so we talked about it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and remember though that UFOs wasn't even the first thing that people jumped to so much as it was kind of, I guess, conspiracy theory of weaponized satellite programs.
That's the
true.
interesting part of the story is the theory on the weaponized satellites. At the time, I know I think it was the U.S. was changing its treaty and policies on weaponized satellites and deploying them and things like that. And that's pretty much the most interesting thing to theorize on was it a piece of debris or was it a weapon?
Yeah, but sadly, all we can really do on that is theorize, because even if one of us had enough military clearance to know about that, we really couldn't think about it if we did.
Yeah, no, if you have the military clearance to know about it, you do not ever talk about it.
But that's why we're called restricted access.
If the location of the satellite was over Area 51, I could talk about it all day. You know what I mean? I could what could it have been? But I don't think it was any interesting part of the world that it was over, or any military secret. Well, I guess a secret's a secret, right? But any theorized secret military bases in that area. So.
And I think if you were an alien though and you wanted to take down a satellite, then maybe you would go for something a little bit less obvious like that.
Yeah, but if we're going that far into theorizing aliens, if they wanted to test something, I don't know. It just seems so bizarre to me that if they had interstellar travel and technology capable of things of that nature, that they would need to blow up one of our satellites, unless it was something really important, I guess.
Well, maybe they just can't see satellites,
Or we shoot tin cans off a fence. Maybe you get bored traveling across the galaxy.
They're just testing their new plasma rifles. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that one, as far as the cases go, it does lead towards perhaps just a very normal sort of explanation.
No, probably aliens.
Oh, aliens, yeah, sorry. But this does lead us into a case that is, wow, this one's a big one. Staying on the theme of aliens, the Stan Romanek case.
Where do we start?
I have such a guilty pleasure with it because I want to believe so bad, and I know that I'm biased in that regard.
I want to believe, but in fact, I do believe in aliens. The issue is that I don't let that stop me from critically analyzing and questioning everything. And
The Stan Romanek case combines two of my favorite things: stories about aliens and alien abduction, and puppetry. And it's just so immensely entertaining to me to watch these videos. And you literally see in one of them, you know, you've got what is clearly a puppet, because it's leaning around this like kitchen glass door. And I mean, seriously, I challenge anybody listening to this, try to peek around a corner at a 45-degree angle without supporting yourself on anything. Other people are nearby so they can laugh at you when you fall down. Like, it's not a thing people can do. These aliens still have to conform to the laws of physics as they exist on our planet. So, you know, unless you've got, you know, somebody's hand in you supporting you, there's just no way to do it. And the fact that anybody would record that and present it as evidence is just the best.
Well, you know, maybe I know planking was big around that time, wasn't it? So maybe the
I was about to say, you need to see core workouts to get that going.
Planking's been replaced by peaking.
And they're light years ahead of us, so they're probably doing things that we don't even know about.
You heard it here first on Restricted Access. It was, and as well, it's the I can't remember what he called them, the Star Daughters or whatever. His selection of
his Star Daughters.
Yeah, space babies. They the evidence brought forward looked just like the worst kind of photoshopping. It was just so completely blatant. Unbelievable, right?
It was blatantly photoshopped. At the very least, he could have used a picture of a little girl that was lit the same way as the photo.
I go as far as to say that it's not even Photoshop. That's like Paint, MS Paint level photo editing. It did nothing for me.
So what do you guys think?
Audrey calls, which were using a text-to-speech engine with the voice engine of Audrey.
One of the other things that I had noticed, which I don't think that we brought up, but it just stood out really hard to me, which I know anybody who really wants to believe could just explain it as they're different species or subspecies or something like that. But it seems like every time there was a different typical gray alien that showed up in his photos, completely different physiology.
And totally different sizes.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, their eyes, their cranial structure, everything like that was so completely different from one another. So that was just a major red flag to me right there amongst all the others.
And we also pointed out the staging of the photographs. That, you know, when you're composing a photograph to capture something in the background, you put the subject off to one side and leave a big old blank space. And all the photos where something appeared in the background or something was lurking in the background, it was like that was actually given the focus in the first place. It's almost like he just hadn't thought through the process of how to make this look genuine, and why these things are always so keen to just stand in the background of photos, in the same kind of way, just kind of standing there, just lurking. I don't know. It's just spooky 101, isn't it? It's like
80s slasher flick.
Right. Yeah. I love the idea that aliens traveled, either through dimensions or over countless light years to get all the way to Earth to spy on this one guy, not using, the almost magical level of technology they would have to perform that kind of travel. Oh, no. They're going to sneak up on him, behind him, and peer through his window like a creeper.
Well, remember, he's a starseed.
Well, okay, guys, hang on. I'm gonna try to be devil's advocate for Stan here. Tobias, I'm gonna agree with you right off the bat, though, that all the videos with the aliens in it, I definitely get a Weekend at Bernie's vibe as well. But I will. What about what happened there with you see the light outside the house, And the next day he sees that the siding is all melted. Like, why would somebody do that to their own house? You know, that costs money.
Because
You do realize how much money he makes from all this.
But he wasn't as famous back then when this is all happening, though.
True. However, why does anybody do any of that stuff? Or could it have already been like that and him claiming that's what happened?
We also have to get into his mindset. I mean, this is a man who is seeking attention quite aggressively. You know, this is a serious amount of effort that's gone in to drawing attention to himself about something that, you know, we're saying now that we're not buying into it. So, you know, we have to question his sort of psychology in across everything. Of course, he'd do crazy things because that's what he's trying to do.
From a psychological standpoint, those who are compulsive liars, literally liars on a compulsive scale, so it is a mental disorder, they can do things that are such large hoaxes because they literally convince themselves of its validity. So he could, even though he did not pass a lie detector at one point in time, he could potentially pass other lie detector tests because he has fully convinced himself in the deep recesses of his mind that this is reality. It's a delusion. It's a complex.
Right, but I mean, what about there's lie detector tests, right? But what about the world test? You know, if I was this guy's neighbor and I saw him lighting fires outside of the side of his house, I would almost feel compelled to report something like that, or at least ask him, hey Stan, what are you doing? You know, like nobody's
doesn't look like fire damage.
Well, I mean, anything, right? Even a heat gun. Like nobody's come forward and said, like, oh, I was Stan's neighbor. The guy's a whack job, you know?
We don't know how close his neighbors live, actually.
Well, there's a couple things to think about here. One, Stan Romanek very famously failed a lie detector test on the Coast to Coast AM radio show. So he can't pass a lie detector test. That's not a thing he can do. Also, as far as the supposed damage to the side of his house, the light itself actually doesn't look very much like a spotlight. It looks like a flashlight. It looks, like somebody standing on a roof holding a flashlight, shining it around. And the supposed damage to the side of the house itself, now, admittedly, this is speculation, but bear with me for a moment. Let's say, because he was renting that house, like he didn't own that house, like he and his family rented it. Let's say he knew that his landlord was going to be replacing the siding for whatever reason, because the siding was replaced shortly after this occurred. Let's say he knew that was going to happen. It doesn't cost him anything then at that point, since they're going to be replacing the siding anyway. I mean, why not mess with it? And Marri's right. It doesn't look like heat damage. I paid my way through college by being a painter, and something we used pretty frequently was a power washer. It looks like he had a dirty house that somebody hit in an arc with a power washer or something, and that made that mark. So I don't know. I don't know that any of that necessarily happened, but it's an explanation. It's possible.
And one of the things we actually touched on in the video as well is that once, even if there was one single shred of truth, if one single thing that happened to him, he was completely telling the truth about. As soon as you've made these other things, these photos, the blatant puppetry, all this kind of thing, as soon as you realize that some things are staged, there's no reason to believe that any of it's real. It ruins the credibility of everything that he's reported.
That's true, yeah. Stan, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I tried pulling for you, but I don't think it's going to happen, buddy.
Always the polite.
We are Canadian.
This is why I want to move to Canada. Yeah, it's incredible.
There's also the issue of compulsive attention seekers who have severe inferiority complexes. They try to compensate for their dull life and their lack of, spectacularness by trying to pretend they are spectacular. I had a friend who for a very long time pretended that he was a magical half-elf, half-dragon, convincing actually quite a few of our high school friends somehow, and became very convinced of it himself, that he was some shred of chaos and was sent to bring magic back into the world. And he was very adamant that he was this super special snowflake. And it sounds so much to me like all of these Starseed TTS recordings. You know, he's a starseed. Don't be afraid of what you are. You're a starseed. Oh, aren't you a special little snowflake?
So whenever we're talking about that from a psychological standpoint, that's whenever we move into what is known as delusions of grandeur. Delusions of grandeur is a mental disorder where you have convinced yourself that you are something larger than life. And it is a way that people generally cope with trauma and severe issues with inadequacy, where they feel like they are not living up to something that they could be. So they develop a new thing in their mind, in their subconscious for the most part, and they essentially just lie about it because they truly, for the most part, believe that they are this grandiose creature from another plane of existence or UFO or anything like that. It's very interesting, but it's sad at the same time.
Right, but nobody's come forward. And I mean, you know, people go where the money is, right? So if somebody thinks they're going to cash in on an interview to tell the story of Stan Romanek growing up, and things like that, you know, they're going to try to do that, right? And nobody's ever come forward and said, hey, you know, I was in grade school with Stan, or hey, I was in high school with Stan, and he was calling himself Space Wizard Mick Supreme before Starseed came out. Like, nobody's ever said, hey, you know, I grew up with Stan, and he, you know, he wasn't weird like this when he was growing up, or he was weird like this when he was growing up. Okay.
One of the big things about delusions of grandeur is it can be a byproduct of many other things.
There are a lot of people in the world that are going to be going through a similar thing like this. And the reason why his case has sort of come to light is because there are a set of circumstances that meant that maybe someone hasn't come forward to disprove it. You know, a group of people haven't just suppressed him because they know what he's like or something. He's slipped through the net to a certain extent and been able to get this far. But we have to imagine that there are probably a lot of people out there who are also making themselves believe, or trying to make other people believe, that they've had similar experiences. I mean, a lot of us spend a lot of time on Reddit, on the subreddits, which are, you know, relevant to our channel and things like that. And we see a lot of first-hand accounts that when I read them, I get the same kind of feel that these people are creating a fiction, and they're trying to get it out of their system, and they're trying to present it as real. And Stan's just managed to get a whole step further than everyone else, as far as I'm concerned. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, I wanted to speak very quickly, if I could, to the idea that nobody has come forward out of Stan's past. And, you know, again, this is speculation, but just going with the very little that we know about him, he has, you know, said before that he grew up in the Air Force, I think it was, you know, moving around a lot. So, I mean, it's possible that if he was displaying early symptoms of, you know, say a mental illness or just, you know, being, I don't know, kind of a person who makes stuff up, you know, maybe because he moved around so often from base to base, you know, nobody ever had the opportunity to get him, like, to get to know him well enough to where they would be comfortable coming out and saying that about him.
Yeah, and you're putting yourself in quite a big, quite a sort of a risky place, aren't you? If you come out, well, he's got this much media attention now. He's on, you know, we've got stuff on Netflix and countless videos on YouTube and the likes about it. To come out is, you've got to be fairly brave and, you know, willing to really put yourself out there to go against this guy on such a personal level. And, you know, it would be quite easy to say that there are just the people that are in that situation aren't interested in doing that to themselves.
And it is kind of a human thing. Like, I've known some terrific liars in my lifetime. And instead of calling them out on the stuff they say, it's just easier to be like, just think to yourself, well, that didn't happen.
Yeah, like I was saying with the friend of mine that made up that whole big story to make himself to escape. Yeah, it absolutely would have been a delusion of grandeur, as Sam was saying, and I know the catalyst for it. He had an extremely abusive mother, and I would never even dream of, calling him out in a way that, people would know who I'm talking about. No one who's watching this is going to know who I'm talking about. Well, that's a lie. I know a couple of my friends might know who I'm talking about, but they already know he's delusional.
So does anyone, obviously we've got some, varied opinions there on what's going on. I know, Ethan, you're a bit more open to what's going on. So what is it about this case that you've thought was real? I mean, you've obviously support Stan a lot more. You've seen the evidence, and something about it is telling you there's something deeper. So, I mean, do you want to tell us more about that?
Well, it's to me, I don't know if I believe or disbelieve any more or less than you guys. I'm just, I want to believe in Stan Romanek, and it is quite weird to me that like I said before, people follow the money. If somebody thinks they're going to get paid to do an interview, or if somebody knows Stan growing up and says, I could get paid to do an interview to disprove this guy, somebody would do it. Somebody somewhere would do it, and just say, just to say, I grew up with the guy, and yeah, he's a whack job. He's always making these videos and things like that, and nobody's come forward from his past to do that, and then to carry on from that as well. Like, who, in my opinion, like, that is so much effort to make these videos. Well, Tobias, I know that they're pretty low budget videos, but who would go through all this effort to make these videos and to Photoshop these pictures? And he didn't have kids of his own, or he had stepkids, I'm not sure, but it is reported that kids would come up to him at his lectures and at these UFO conventions, and it's like, well, what kind of parent would lend their kids to do that, once again, free of charge? And there is a lot of things to me that it's like, well, maybe the guy truly believes it himself, or if it is fake, like, obviously he's put in quite a bit of effort to fake it, and he's inconvenienced himself quite a bit.
So in terms of the evidence itself, I mean, I know several of us think that there hasn't been a lot of effort put into the evidence. Is there any particular bit that you saw that you thought, actually, that could be legit? Yeah,
well, I mean, the reports of the kids coming up to him and calling him Starseed, or the conference calls that he's having with his friends, and they're getting hijacked by voices of kids once again. Like, kids aren't really good actors, unless they're professionals. And I just feel like, even one of these kids, it's been years now. Why haven't one of these kids come forward and said, oh yeah, no, I was just kind of screwing around as well. It's just part of growing up, haha, kind of thing, right? And none of that's happened.
The voices are text-to-speech engines. Everything in those calls, those are text to voice.
Well, not all of it, Marri. There was a child, like a real life child, talking in the phone conversations.
Oh, I heard the child, and I'm still convinced that's a text-to-speech engine.
Really?
The way the cadence is, the way that it speaks, that is not a real little girl.
But I mean, like, keep in mind that this is the early 2000s. I mean, I still have trouble getting my text-to-speach working now, and it's 2017.
I had a text-to-speech engine in the early 2000s because I'm dyslexic.
Yeah, I think that the technology has been around. It's definitely been around for a while, because I was using sort of speech synthesis a long time ago as well.
One of the voices that you hear is the specific voice Audrey, which is one of the voices I use most frequently.
Just go into one particular bit of evidence. There's that really famous clip, the Boo video, I think it's called, the one where Stan sort of jumps up and runs over to the window, and there's a thing peeking up. One of the Muppets sticks its head up, and an alien sticks its head up. That particular video, Ethan. What I mean, when you saw that, do you think that this could be real? I mean, we're obviously being
No,
and saying, it's puppetry, but
I do. Like I said to Tobias before, I do get a bit of a Weekend at Bernie's vibe from these videos, and it doesn't look real to me. That either of the aliens or even the photograph, where if you turn up the resolution, you can see the aliens in the background and stuff like that, or that little girl between the posts. I mean, I'm not trying to convince you guys that it is all real, but I'm trying to be a little bit more of a devil's advocate. And like the psychology of it, with how much this man has inconvenienced himself or put himself on the pedestal to be ridiculed or argued with, that's the most convincing part to me. But no, the videos, I gotta agree with you guys on the videos. They're pretty cheesy.
The problem with him putting himself up to be ridiculed is that plays into the delusion of grandeur. Oh, these people, they're below me. How dare they ridicule me? That you get this thrill out of being the victim. The people that come up and jump to your defense. How dare you ridicule him? That's part of the building yourself up as this amazing star seed.
Yeah, it's not like he doesn't have a cult following of people supporting him, who sort of hang on his every word and think that he is this space prophet that he claims to be. Oh, and also I should mention, Marri, when you said that you had a voice to text device in the early 2000s due to dyslexia, guess who else is dyslexic?
Oh,
Our Stan Romanek. Yeah, weird, huh?
So we could, so it's perfectly feasible that he had the exact same thing, and perhaps that's why you both identify that voice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things we did say in the video itself, we said, because we can look at the whole thing and we can say, right, there's a number of things were just obviously fakes to us, or we believe that they were obviously fake. But we did put forward the idea that, what if he did have some experiences and was the kind of person that didn't know how to, he had no evidence, for example. What if he was the kind of person that thought, well, how about I fabricate this evidence to get the story out there based on something that happened? I mean, that is one idea that we've put forward, that it could be something.
Yeah, and same with the markings. Like he'd get weird markings and wounded and stuff like that. Why would somebody self-mutilate themselves just to make a few bucks, essentially, right? It's just it's just crazy to me that somebody would do that.
Okay, if we're going with the idea that there could be a delusion or psychological issue involved, self-mutilation is often part of a victim complex. So if the delusion is great enough, they can wound themselves and not even have any recollection that they've done that. It's something that they do to essentially justify their own delusion and make it more realistic to others.
I'm going to put out another theory on that of if he is suffering from any sort of depression due to some sort of trauma. I myself have suffered from bipolar disorder, and before I was medicated for it, I would frequently hurt myself, often pretty badly, and sometimes I would have no memory of actually doing it, and would wonder where these cuts, bruises, and such came from, only to find out I did it to myself.
Yeah, and I've had the same issue. I actually was almost hospitalized because of it, because I blacked out and had no idea what I had done.
So yeah, I mean, it does. I know that Ethan, you're coming from like a very sort of forgiving perspective on it, but if he does, if the guy does have some issues, I think it can all be explained within that. All of these things. Why would he damage this stuff? Why would he mutilate himself? Why would he lie? Why would he put in so much effort? I think it can all be put down to these same sort of set of disorders.
And if he didn't have these delusions or these problems in the past, that could be why nobody is coming out to say, yeah, it's all bubkiss.
So what about, though, would these delusions hold up under hypnosis? you know, because he was hypnotized, and I think he was writing some obscure equations and things like that under hypnosis that he had no business knowing. What do you guys think of that?
Some people are incapable of being hypnotized, and he could have been faking it. I actually know several people who they cannot be hypnotized as well. He simply could have memorized these obscure equations to jot down because he knew he was going to be hypnotized.
I believe a lot of hypnosis requires the subject to be compliant as well. I think part of hypnosis is you have to be up for it. So if he went into this, you know, not knowing that he was going to bypass it, you could just do that.
I actually, I can't be hypnotized. And I had a stepfather at one point in time in my life who was a stage magician. And hypnosis was one of the things that he did. And he would prime me as essentially a fake in locations whenever he was doing shows. And he would have me act like I was hypnotized and pretend. And I would run through a script that I had memorized.
You know, I'm not a psychologist. I don't have any sort of clinical background, but it was my understanding that, you know, people were very divided on the level to which hypnotism is actually clinically useful. I guess I never, I didn't think that it was something that any psychologist really thought was a way to learn any sort of objective truth so much as someone's experience. And so if it just so happened that like Stan believed these things had happened to him, then yeah, of course he's going to say it under hypnosis. It's not a magic, you know, truth serum.
That is very true, Tobias. If the delusion is great enough, it's in your subconscious. It is what you truly, truly believe because it's a psychosis. So even if you're hypnotized, you're just going to say what you believe is real. It doesn't mean that it is actually real. That's why most psychologists don't actually use it and consider it a pseudoscience.
And of course, memorizing an equation, that's just something that anyone can teach themselves to remember, sort of long strings of information. And if you wanted to create an illusion, if you wanted to create a trick where you know, were hypnotized and reached into your subconscious and had all these equations that had no reason to be there, I don't think it's that difficult for most people to do that.
No, and I know that Mark at least had brought up that equation was only a minor difference of, I think he said the Drake's equation or the Drake equation.
So yeah, have we got any more? Has anyone got any final thoughts they want to put on this? Because it's very controversial and it's very big at the moment, and I'm sure everyone's got a lot of different opinions of it, and I know there are still a lot of people out there who will be listening to this and who are staunch supporters of Stan Romanek, and you know will have a counterpoint to what we're saying, or you know have some other thing going on with it. But I mean, this is definitely one of the more interesting cases that have come up recently.
I do believe in aliens, and that's why fakes bother me so much. That's why I am so upset about people like him.
I wouldn't say that I wholly disbelieve everything in this. It's just I'm speaking from my scientific background, my knowledge, and it seems a lot more feasible and a lot more probable that this would easily be explained with a psychosis as opposed to aliens. Because I would love to believe that it's real, but it just doesn't appear that way to me. But I'm also not trying to convince anyone else that it's false.
And with this one as well, I think it would be a lot more. It would be left a lot more open and a lot more believable had the evidence put forward not been so ridiculous in the way that it is. I mean, I know that we can't turn around and say for 100% that is a puppet, but you really should look at that evidence and think, what is this most likely to be? You know, is this more likely to be an alien that has mastered some ridiculous core, you know, positioning that it can it can sound like this, or is this a puppet? I think as soon as you've added up a few of those bits of evidence, you'd be doing yourself a disservice to try and invest in this story anymore. I think that's enough to just say, right, let's move on from this, because it's, you know, it's clearly something a bit sort of revolving around this man's psychology and what he wants you to believe, and you don't want to be buying into that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'll wrap my final thoughts up here by saying that everything you guys say is can be completely justified, right? And it is hard to justify, especially the videos, because you're right. If the moment you fake one thing, it does take away credibility from everything else you've said, no matter how true that is, right? Your boy who cried wolf situation. But for all the pro Stan Romanek guys, I hope I did a good job trying to defend him for you. Because I want to believe Stan Romanek. I think that the story itself is pretty compelling, or not compelling, but pretty easy to kind of get sucked down that rabbit hole. So
I think if people want to open a discussion about this in a sort of critical thinking way, throw in a comment if you think that the way we've approached the evidence isn't right, then I think we'd like to hear that.
Or even if there's better evidence that we haven't covered that you would like to bring to our attention, we'd love to revisit this at some point in time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And for everybody out there listening, I hope that you guys don't get the wrong impression. We all think Ethan is great.
Absolutely.
It just so happens, to keep a conversation interesting, somebody has to be devil's advocate. And just on a personal note, I will say, as an investigator, it's always been my long time policy to always proceed as though what an eyewitness is telling me is absolutely true, up until I have hard evidence that it isn't. And I just so happen to believe that we have that with Stan Romanek, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. I think the evidence we have, if anything, is evidence that it's not real.
And Stan, once again, if you're listening, if you're able to beat hypnosis, maybe if you're willing to be subject to a truth serum, I think we would all appreciate that.
Is there a decent truth serum that's not going to poison him?
Well, what's a little poison, right? As long as you get the truth.
I thought you were the one who wanted it to be real.
The dark side of Canada. Right, I think that brings this restricted access live to a close. Is there anything else we want to say? Or
no, just like and subscribe.
And definitely thanks to everybody for listening. Of course, we appreciate it.